Right, so bit of an update. I cleaned up the three sort of points where the sill interacts, which is obviously front, back and B post and A post here. This is a Wadham's outer sill and I've got nothing against it, but if you're doing what I'm doing and trying to save I've saved the original inner sill and middle sill, you have to do some adjustment, shall we say, but it's lining up all right. And the key thing is to try and get these kind of points here smoother, sort of leading into each other, which that's pretty close there. Just needs a little bit of welding and stuff when I do that, but at the moment it's all being held on by panel screws and clamps. This one's not too bad here. This is lining up okay here. There's a slight difference in height there, but I can probably adjust that, and it tends to sort of be a case of pushing down a bit on the sill, and that sort of seems to adjust it. So there's always a bit of manipulating to be done, and to be fair there was on the other side, but it's just a bit more complicated when you're trying to sort of use a new sill with an old sill. So that's just clamped temporarily. This is a little bit at the back. I need to do some more work on this. I think I might shorten that down a bit, so it sits within the recess. But yeah, it is a fiddly job. I did cut the sill in half to do this. There's just no way you would have done it in one piece. It would have been a nightmare, and that just makes it a bit easier to sort of focus on one part and the other. So when it's all said and done, I'll be sort of trying to line these two up and obviously just sort of butt weld down through there. I might put a plate in so there's a tongue that overlaps between the two, giving me something to sort of spot weld in place, and then sort of give me something to weld against if I'm trying to fill the gap there. But anyway, it's getting there slowly. This is probably another few hours of manipulation and fiddling and swearing before it's finally ready to go in, but I'm pretty close. Not spot welded in, just panel screws. Managed to get a nice line up here, although it just needs a tiny bit of manipulation, probably just literally the tiniest amount of pushing there just to get it to line up. But I've got a nice straight line down the body line there, or about down the bend. So things are lined up. This is in place. This will blend in nicely here. Just got to tip this bit of flange back over here that basically just spot welds into that. So yeah, so kind of almost there. Looking good. Okay, just a quickie, quick update. So I fitted the rear door just to get a rough idea of what it all looks like when it's together. It's a nice even gap along the sill. The door's not perfect yet, and I probably need to do some work on the front hinges and move the door forward a bit. This gap was very tight, I remember. So yeah, but no, I mean it's all right. It's a good fit, and the gap along the bottom is pretty much perfect, but probably even better than the other side. But anyway, there you go. Just look at this side then. So that gives me the confidence now to weld in the outer sill. Before I do that, I need to take it all off and paint it, so that'll be my next job. So there you go. Okay, so I've been moved on to something temporarily while I'm waiting for paint to dry. So I've just given all of this 2 coats of the epoxy primer that's still wet, so that I can then start to put things back together here. Likewise, all of that's in epoxy primer, or the epoxy mastic, should I say, which is the rust buster product, which is just 2 coats of that, and it's bulletproof stuff. So yeah, so while I'm waiting for that to dry, I thought I'd attack the spare wheel carrier, which didn't look too bad, and isn't, to be fair, compared to some of them. And I cut out this piece before removing the frame, and then realised the frame, that even though that was the only bit of serious kind of holes and corrosion, that there was a lot of trap rust in between the frame and that. So there's no point in just giving it all a coat of paint if you're not going to deal with that. So it's a fiddly job. You have got a hell of a lot of spot welds to drill out. I mean, there's got to be, look, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 20, 30, 40, probably about 70 spot welds to drill out. I also cut rather than remove this bracket here, I just cut straight across it. I'm going to leave that in place because I didn't want to have to take all that off as well. It's all part of the folded edge, so I thought I'll leave that. Funnily enough, it's been repaired before, possibly even from the factory, I don't know, and you can see where it was re-welded there, so they did a similar thing but cut it further up. So so I'm going to take this back down the media blasting cabinet later and finish the job off. And also some of these rust spots have come back, so I'm just going to give it all a good blasting again, and then I am going to repair any rust holes and treat all of this with some epoxy paint, and then spot weld it all back together again, which should be fun. So there you go. So I'm trying to do a proper job on this because obviously it does get a hell of a lot of crap on it over time, and frankly I'm amazed this one's in as good a condition as it is based on the rust in the sills and everywhere else. So possibly a new one at some point, but it's really not too bad. So yeah, so that's where I am at the moment while I wait for paint to dry. Guys, so yeah, just this has been quite a tiresome job. This is quite a long-winded job because there's so many spot welds and then there was so many little patches of rust. So I welded in plates, replacing the really rusty areas. I've given it one coat of epoxy primer. I masked off where the spot welds are going to go so that I could just have a bit of weld through primer there. Now I'm going to weld it all back up. Then I'm going to give it one final thick coat of epoxy, getting it into all the little nooks and crannies. So I welded that back there, and I'll clean that up in a minute. Because of all the welding, there's obviously some deformation here, and it's sort of oil canning, if you'd like to call it that. So, you know, when you push down on it, it pops up and then it pops back down again, so it's not all sitting flush to the frame. Before I weld it, I'm just going to get some panel screws and try and get it all so it's sitting flush, and then makes welding a lot easier. And yeah, so I want to get this finished, get it out the way somewhere because it takes up quite a lot of space. It's quite a cumbersome piece of kit, so I want to get that out of the way somewhere, and then get back onto finishing off attaching the sills and the rear valance, and then looking at what's next. Okay, so I've welded it all back together. After the first coat of epoxy, I welded it back together actually, and then I've just given it a really good thick coat and got it into all the nooks and crannies. So it's going to be certainly bought it a few more years anyway. So that's all back together again. Changed these out for stainless steel. While I was at it, I also have cleaned off and shot blasted or sandblasted the suspension components for the back, or some of them, and I've given those a coat of epoxy mastic as well. So that can now sit and dry overnight, or at least takes a couple of days to really go off, but once it does, it's like cast iron. And I'm going to get back on the sill. I've just got it up there at the minute. I've got to do a few little things and then get the sill fitted and spot welded in. This has all been painted on the inside, so that can go back on as well. And then yeah, on to the next job, whatever that might be. Can't really think at the moment. I've got a weld on the bottom of the A post that I've made to replace the rotten bit. It was only the bottom couple of inches on this one, so it's not too bad. And that bracket's ready to go back in. I welded up this and made a new little channel here to go in, so that's ready to go back in, and weld that back. So Saturday today, Sunday tomorrow, should have most of that done, and I'm hoping to get the sills fitted and welded on tomorrow as well, and then yeah, ready for the next weekend of fun. So okay, just a quick update. The sill is tacked in place. Put a few spot welds in there. I had it all lined up with screws to start with, made sure I had everything lined up here. I mean, it's all looking messy because I haven't touched any of the haven't ground back anything yet, but obviously got to fill all this with plug welds, with butt welds, likewise all the way down there, but everything lines up and there's no kind of ridge between them, likewise here and there. I put some plates in here, like a sort of a tongue, which is then spot welded both sides just to add a bit of extra strength, although I don't think it's going to need it. And these plug welds are now in. This has just got one plug weld there, a couple of welds there to tack it in place, and already it's as solid as a rock. So, and again, a few more plug welds under here as well. So everything's kind of in place. I'm committed. This is loose, just waiting to be welded in place, but I can do that afterwards. That's no problem. I can just do some plug welds up there and a bit of a welding across the top, and then that will be back in place, and then I can weld it to the top of the sill. That all kind of will blend in nicely once I've welded up underneath there. And then you've got the flange at the back of the sill, which you have to sort of manipulate round, which is that bit there. Not that you can see, but it's basically a sort of the lip that comes up here, which will then be spot welded into the other side of the wing. So all of this will be very solid. So yes, finally, that's it. The sill's on. Okay guys, so just another little update. So I've just been cleaning up all the plug welds along there and along the bottom as well. This is all nicely blended in, it's quite happy with that. It's going to need a little skim, but it's not horrendous. It's all blended in, there is bits and pieces at the end here. So we've got a nice smooth transition for seals to sit against, that sort of thing. I guess one of the next jobs will be moving on to finish off the internals here. The rest of the skin comes down on the inner wheel arch, and I think I'm going to bend that piece there at the end of the sill up to give me something else to sort of spot weld to, give a bit more strength. But I'm not too concerned. Strength is certainly not going to be an issue with all this when I'm done. So welded back in this repaired plate here, and sort of blended that in there. So I've recreated the channel for the piece of leather or rubber or whatever it is that you put down here. That's actually broken off at the bottom, so I might actually place that, but it should be fine. So yeah, so that's all done. Now just all I'm doing now is putting on the rear valance. Got to weld that back up here, and then spot weld along the bottom and along the top. Recreate the lip of the seal, where the seal goes for the boot when it closes. So I've got a bit of work to do there, and it's from when I took it off, it's a bit crooked, so I'm going to have to do a little bit of tappy tap at the end of it all just to straighten things out a bit. I want to get it on first. So yeah, so that's where I am at the minute. Get that done, and then yeah, nearly done on the welding, I think, hopefully. Just got lots of little repairs. Actually, it's not too bad this side. That side's got a little bit of a rusty bit there, so I need to replace a bit of the lip. Obviously I've got my wheel tub ready to go back on when I can finish up. The next thing I'm going to do then, I think, is get the leaf springs back from my other storage place and strip those down, shot blast, sandblast, media blast them, and then grease them up and wrap them in Denso tape. Give the axle a good clean up and a paint. I don't have any concerns about the diff. It was nice and positive on the diff, and it had a recent diff change after the Jensen axle that was on there failed, and they put a standard axle back on it. So the diff seems good, and certainly from my limited driving of the car before I bought it in here, which wasn't very far, it certainly didn't sound like it was going to be a problem. So I want to get it back on, suspension back on the back, get all that up and running, finished, but I've got to get underneath and needle gun all the old underseal off first and paint it, and then I can do that, and then get it on its back wheels effectively, and then it's a case of moving on to the front, taking the engine out, subframe off, and then working forwards from about here to then needle gun and paint underneath the car, do inside in the engine bay, give the suspension a good overhaul, and then get that all back on again. So yeah, make it sound simple, there's lots to do, but I'm quite glad that I'm coming to the end of the welding, I have to be honest. It's been a long old slog. There you go. Okay, so the rear valance is welded on, spot welded or plug welded top and bottom. Need a little bit more straightening out, but it's looking okay. And obviously this is all going to be covered over by the seal anyway, but I'm going to try and run a bit of epoxy mastic down the back to go around where the plug welds are, and also, I mean, this is all open, so you can get access in here. So what I'm thinking of doing is getting a syringe with a load of thinned epoxy mastic and squirting it and filling along the bottom of the trench, as it were, to then sort of run down in between the welded joints, give it the best chance it can of survival. So yeah, considering I didn't replace the panel and just sort of made good, I'm not too unhappy with that. And a little bit of filler and it'll look okay, and it's all hidden by the bumper anyway. So yes, done. Now I've just got to finish off this bit here, which is obviously the rear wheel well, where it joins the outer sill. So this piece I made up previously goes in there, and then got the other piece there, and then another little piece here. So got to try and make all those work. So that's my next job, and once I've done that, then it's going to be a case of wandering around and looking for small things to do, because I've got a hole there, hole there, hole there. So I'd cut a little bit out here and a little bit there and fill those up. A bit more grinding to be done just to smarten things up. Otherwise it's yeah, it's getting there. So get some light on the situation. So what I'm doing is I've got this piece here, sort of roughly in place, and what I'm then going to do is add on, so that piece there then slots in there, and these three together make up the whole thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to weld them together now, make it into one piece, because it's roughly where it needs to be, and just a little bit of sort of manipulation will get it into the place it needs to be. So I think I'm going to turn it into a single piece, but overlap them and just spot weld them in place, just tack them in place, so to create sort of one single lump. That's probably where I'm going to go with this. So we shall see. So slight change of plan. I've just gone in and got this piece fitted first. It was just going to be easier, I think, rather than trying to get everything lining up in one go. So that's tacked in place. Then I'll obviously complete that and run it all the way down, tack all of these, fill the gaps. Got a bit of a hole here to deal with, so I'll cut a bit of this out, or maybe just try and get it with a welder, we'll see. Just a bit thin around here. So next I'm going to get this next piece fitted, and then yeah, go from there. Right, so there you go, that's all in. So I've got all this now. I've got a couple more welds there to smooth off, but that's all nicely connected in, solid. Just got to cover that at the end, and then weld on a plate to block that off. And then I've got a couple of little repairs to do. So cut out a section here, and then get this bolt out somehow. And this is a seatbelt mounting point, which obviously isn't used unless you have the seat belts, which I don't. So I'm going to take the bolt out and weld that up, and then the bolt can go back in. So there you go. This is all plug welded onto the end of the sill. It's like an iron girder. That's not going to break. Okay, so I've just put that piece of metal in there. Obviously you need to grind that back, so I'm just looking at this. So I managed to get enough heat into that I could get out the screw from the other side. So when you look at the other side, you've got 4 spot welds. So I'm going to drill those out so I can remove the plate, and then I'm probably just going to cut a rectangular plate and just let that in, and then yeah, put it back together again. So that's pretty much all it is. It's pretty straightforward. Okay, so we've got that done. Given that running over with the sanding belt, I actually put another plate in. I didn't try and butt weld it in perfectly, because this is obviously a pretty stress point if anyone does fit seat belts. I doubt I will, but you know, you never know what might happen in the future. So I took it all, I just cut it straight out with this in situ, then drilled out the 4 spot welds to free up that plate, and then I got a piece of 1.2mm, which is thicker than the original anyway, and just oversized it, laid it over the top, lap welded it all the way around there, and then lap welded it all the way around in here as well. All of this is going to be covered over anyway, and I'd rather have the strength than try and make it look totally factory. So I cleaned out the nut, that's all good, and I will be treating that with some grease. But then having said that, once I've epoxy mastic this, I'm going to cover that bolt so it can get sealed up by the epoxy mastic, and then it won't get all the shit in it which causes them to rust up, and then makes it very difficult to get them back out if you ever decide to fit seat belts. So there you go, back end done apart from the end of the sill, but I'll sort that out tomorrow.